NoCoders Office Hours, episode 255. I'm your host, Cameron, and I am here with Stuart today, as well as Tanya in the background. Before we get started, if this is your first time tuning in, we do office hours 6 times per week. You can come in and ask us your bubble questions. We can't promise answers, but we do promise you at least won't suffer alone. And we get it right most of the time, so let's go ahead and get it started. Stuart, Tanya said you have formulated that question for me. What am I helping you with today?
Okay, so I suppose, first of all, the project. The project is, I'm trying to build, it's my first bubble project. And I'm building a multi-tenant SaaS product where there's going to be multiple businesses that sign up. Each of these businesses has multiple users, and each business sees its own data. So that's, the kind of the use of the product.
Yep.
And what I'm trying to do is I would like this project management app, the users to create their own stages and statuses for the project. And each of those businesses, effectively, or companies that sign up can create their own set of like milestones for projects and what have you.
Sure.
The issue I'm having is how do I set up a workflow for something that doesn't yet exist as such? So they create like a master set of stages and statuses. And when they create a new project, those status and stages have to be applied to that individual project, but they could be different each time. So how do I get the values of say a date for that status?
Sure. So
do you understand what I'm trying to explain?
Yeah, so it's a multi-tenant SaaS product, like you were saying, where each user and each project is going to be relative to that user and that business. So no other business.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And so to address your first concern, to my knowledge, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to make something with data values that don't exist yet. You would have to create those in your database. So let's say your database has tenant, then your database has project, and then your database has, let's say, status. Just 3 things to keep it simple.
Yeah.
So if you don't have any of those 3, let's focus on if you don't have a status database. When you're adding a project, there's just going to be no way for Bubble to look anywhere in its program and say, we'd like to add this status. So to simplify, you will need those records, or at least those database tables, to have been created before you can start manipulating that data. Now, you then also asked though about a date. Was that correct? So you want, let's say, focusing on the status, we create the status. You just want to be able to add a date to it. Is that right?
Yeah, that's it. So each status has a date of when something happens.
Okay, cool. We'll do this. So we're going to create a status. We're also going to, let's create a project. Yeah, not a view. It's down here. Let's add a project. And we'll say that the project has I guess it's going to have a list of statuses.
Yeah.
And we would find that alphabetically where the S is, at least we'd think, right? I did type it in. Unless I'm crazy and I didn't, and I was actually doing the wrong thing. Yeah, here it is. My bad. I think I created a view, not an actual. So find status here. Yep, there it is. And it's going to be a list of things. And then on this, we're going to make sure that we have a date field. Now, you do have a modified date and you do have a created date. I still would, and I'm sure Tanya would say the same thing, recommend creating a separate date field that you can actually reference that isn't native to Bubble. It's just going to give you a little bit more maneuverability around the way that you actually want to display the date, the way you want the date to interact with things, and so on. But we'll start off by going and adding a project. And as you'll notice, we actually have no status. Like if we type in anything, it's not actually going to pop up here.
Yeah.
So what we'll just create the actual project. It has no name, right? Typically in our naming convention and the way that we'd assign things, we'd include probably like a title and a description, keeping it very bare bones right now. But then what we'll do is we do need to create a new status. And we'll just put in an arbitrary date. Cool, I like that. So the way that Bubble works is that each ID has a hash value, or I should say each record has a hash value. It's a unique ID. And so this is the way that we're actually going to be able to reference our status inside our project. So like I said, if it's not created, we're not actually going to be able to do anything here. Now, before I had this value, before I actually added a status, if I had typed 1, similarly to if I had typed A, it's not appearing. But because we have a status, now it is. So we'll be able to add this status to this project. Now, that isn't adding a date to a status, of course. This is just showing you how that data is sort of going to interact with each other. But what we can do, if we go back into our data, actually, and we go to our statuses, let's add a title. We'll just say it's a text. And we're going to go ahead and do two things. We're going to draw an input field so the user can type, and we're going to add a button so the user can submit. Depending on how you set your application up, this may all be completed in the backend to where the user actually doesn't need to do anything, where you'll be able to say inside Bubble, the user will, and in fact, I'll show you actually. I'll edit this workflow. So what we're going to do on this button is when we create this workflow, we are going to create a new thing. And this new thing is going to be a status. We're going to change the date and the title. For the title, very simply, we're just going to go to our input A's value, and we're going to say it's input A's value. And for this date, depending on what you want, typically we'd probably just do a current date time, although you can also use arbitrary date time. So if you wanted to come up with a date time that wasn't today, for instance.
Yeah.
For now, though, we'll just go ahead and select current date time, keep it simple. And so we're creating a status. And now what we want to do is, presumably, we want to add this to the project. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to data, and we're going to make changes to a thing. And this is assuming that we already have a project created. So, of course, there's different ways to approach this. We could create a project when we click create a new status and then add it to that project. But we already have a project. So we're just going to say, we're going to basically just do a search for the project. First item, because there's only one item currently.
Yep.
When you're going through your app, this is where it's going to become super important. When you're adding constraints, you'll be able to say like project ID equals whatever you want this status to update towards specifically. So right now we're sort of just throwing a wide net, despite the fact, of course, we only have one project, but just for illustration purposes. We're going to add this status. We're going to add the result of step 1. So to recap, what we've done is we've put an input field here and a button. We'll just call this a submit button. So the user is going to type in a value, the title. When they've typed in that, we're going to create a new status. We're going to take the title from that input title's value, as well as this date, and then we're going to add it to the project. And so if everything goes smoothly, I got to hack inside real quick. Hacker man. Okay, cool. We're in. And I'm just going to call I'm very creative. We're just going to call this title number 1. And I didn't do anything. I didn't say reset my values or anything. Yep. Traditionally, you would. But let's go back into our data, go into our app data. We do have 2 statuses now, one with the current date time. So for me, it's 6:13 p.m. And then if we go to our projects, we'll notice there are now 2 of these values. And we can double check that this status is the one that we want by taking it. So what I did is I clicked on this pencil, I went to the unique ID and I copied it.
Yep.
And then I'm going to go back to projects and I can search through my browser. Or I should just be able to do this. Search in the search bar, and this one pops up. So now what we have is a project that has 2 statuses. One, of course, which is empty, and then one that has a title and a date. And so that's probably going to be the easiest way, at least manually, right? Like I said, this is going to require a user to click a button. You could have something on the back end that, irrespective of the user, updates with the date. But this is at least how you would approach it from a manual perspective. Hopefully that helps answer your question about how we'd add a date. Do you have any more specific questions tailored towards that? So I went over these things pretty fast, so I can understand, like, if you're like, oh, I'm sort of still confused.
Yeah, a little bit. I'm just trying to think about how I explain because it's in my head. It's quite complicated.
Sure. Yeah, no, I absolutely get it, especially when you're dealing with multi-tenant SaaS applications and any application that's going to have multiple users or multiple ways of organizing the brands
Yeah,
and so on.
it's the organizational part really. It's the each company can create its own stages, and then there has multiple statuses assigned to those stages. So little mini milestones on the overall project milestone. They create them in the back end, so they create their own major milestones, and then their sub milestones. They basically do a little mapping table, and they submit it, and then it locks it into the company. So the company then has that. That's the way that their workflow works. On the project, it automatically builds a timeline of the major milestones and the sub milestones, and they can click on those to change the dates.
So it builds a timeline of milestones and sub milestones.
Yeah. Yes, you have your major, and then, is that complete or not? Yes. What date does that complete? So they change the drop-down status within the project, and it updates the milestones to where they are at.
Gotcha. Okay.
And each of those things can be different per company.
Yep, absolutely. And so the way that you would approach that is very, very similar to the way that this is set up, at least with the nesting of the statuses inside the projects. It's sort of like a Russian nesting doll where it just continually nests. So you would have your projects, and then instead of statuses, perhaps you would have your projects, milestones, and then your statuses.
Yeah.
Where just like the statuses is linked to projects now, your statuses would instead be linked to your milestones, and your milestones instead would be linked to your projects. In the same way that when we created, let's say, our project, we said that we were going to create a status, and then we created a list of statuses. And the reason that we do a list is because, of course, if we didn't, we'd only be able to update one value at a time. And being that we're going to have multiple milestones, we're going to have multiple values. But yes, I do understand entirely. It can be very complex when you're thinking about the way that you organize it. But from at least this topical overview, the way that I would structure it would be brand, project, and then milestone, and then status. Where they're all referencing each other up of basically like a daisy chain of sorts.
Yeah.
And so it really is just a matter of making sure that when you're creating a new type, that you're referencing the item below it, if that makes any sense. Or I guess truly above it. You just need to make sure that they are referencing each other. And you would do that the same way that I showed you how we'd create a list of statuses.
Okay.
So imagine actually we can just say this is a milestone. And a milestone is going to have probably a completed yes or no, and it's going to have a date like you had told me.
Yep.
And then it's going to be assigned to a project where now we really don't need to reference a list of projects. We just need to reference one project. So we'll just say field type equals project. We won't select this because it's only one. And so what ends up happening now, and then we can actually include the status, perhaps, truly, if we really want to, where status is going to, actually, the way that we don't need this yes or no on the milestone, rather, but on the status, we could use a yes or no. It depends. At a certain point, it's just going to be semantics. Like, how do you want it structured, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but for the status, like you could have some logic inside your bubble app that says if the status is a yes or no, or rather, I'm sorry, completed is yes or no. You could have some logic that refers to the milestone, which we just deleted, and we could say, again, completed, yes or no. Again, so now what we're doing is we're getting a bit redundant with the way that we want to approach it. But just goes to show you that there are multiple different ways of sort of using this data to our advantage. Where the logic, let's say, if it says status is completed, then it says that the milestone is completed. Ways of looking at it that way, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah.
Now, one of the things with whether you're traditionally programming or whether you're going to be doing no code is you don't necessarily want to be redundant. You can, and there's really no harm, especially in the no code field. But it does make it easier for you and anybody else that's going to come back and sort of look over you or maybe work on this with you. Reducing the redundancy is a pretty big staple. So lots of organization, lots of ways of thinking about it. But just to recap, in summary, nesting is going to be your best friend, and then referencing those datas is how you're going to accomplish that.
Okay, cool. Cool.
It can get pretty complex and in depth, though. Absolutely. Yeah, I can absolutely understand where you're coming from. I've built an application. It's like a job board application. So you have different businesses that are going to be submitting different jobs, basically. And then, of course, you have a bunch of users that are going to be applying to these different jobs. And in my application, the users have specific skill sets. So if their skill set is this, then they're only going to see that. Versus another user, if their skill set is different, they're going to see a different post, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I'm actually building a similar thing. So.
Amazing. Yeah. It's really similar. And just what we're doing is just making sure that we're nesting and referencing the data types that need to be referenced. And I do resonate with you entirely, though. It can be very, very confusing at first. Absolutely. But hopefully I was able to shine some light on it.
Yeah. I suppose the other question about it is, how do I make changes to something that, yeah, I might have to, it's a hard one for me to, I think I need to actually just do some stuff with this workflow to probably surface the answer.
Do you happen to have a like a rough draft of what you're working on that maybe you'd be comfortable sharing so we could take a look at, or do you just want to go and approach that yourself?
I have the question, but I don't. I think I need to. I think I need to try and see what happens when I play with the idea of this nesting and using some kind of reference point as a way to. Because at the moment I'm trying to build out almost like a dynamic list that is only known at a certain point in time. And so I can't create a workflow to change a thing because it doesn't know what that thing is yet. So I need to kind of have a point of reference that isn't shown to the user necessarily, that I can link it to. But there could be more than, there could be multiple. It could be like a list of 20 things for one company, but only 5 for another company.
Let me show you real quick. I'm going to go ahead and log out of this account and go to a different account where I have that application builder on. And it's a quiz. Basically, the way that I built it is a test taker to begin with. And we're branching out. And so, as you can imagine, there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of answers, there's responses, and then there's quizzes. So everything has to communicate with one another.
Yeah, that sounds like the kind of problem. Yeah.
Yeah, it gets pretty in depth. So you can see, I do have to change this actually. I'll do this. Oops, form answers, just so everything's here synced together. But okay, so we start with a form, and you can see that the form has a category, it has the job type, it has the questions, it has users, and it has all of these different kinds of things. We'll focus primarily here on questions, where I'm referencing the form questions. And the form questions has a list of form answers, and it has a list of form responses. And then if we click on form answers, you can see that we're looking at the form responses. This is how we compare whether or not it's correct or if it's incorrect. And you can see then we're not referencing anything in here. This is the, would you say, the base. This is where all the data is going to be collected, where then we do reference throughout the application, throughout this database, what's going to be communicated and what's not. So to show you, go ahead and show you a form. So I have different forms here where I have different questions. And these, of course, are referencing my list of form questions over on my left-hand side here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. One of the things that is definitely important that you're going to definitely find is that you do need your questions, well, in this case, my questions, to reference a form. And so what I do is I take that unique ID from that form and I put it in the form ID field. And so this is how that is going to communicate with one form in itself. It's not going to look at any other form. So if I open up another form, the only questions that will load will be the ones that have this form ID. And I use the constraints on my do a search for. I say do a search for questions that has this form ID. And so on and so forth. And that's with answers and everything else as well. There's the form ID and question ID as well. So I know which question the answer is related to and so on and so forth.
Gotcha.
So yes, lots of nesting, lots of making sure things are communicating with each other. Your best friend is going to be the unique ID in the event that you, that's not here, let's here. Like the unique IDs. So when you're creating something, we'll just do this real quick. So we'll create a new question, and we'll say form ID equals course A. And then you're able to go down to unique ID. And so this is how you would set certain things up. So your unique ID is going to be a value that doesn't change. You're not able to modify it. So it's a really good starting point to be able to reference certain data types to one another.
Cool. Okay.
And so hopefully seeing it a little bit more in live, like actually in practice, it shines a little bit more light on it than just going over it and showing you how to get the date to add to something.
Yeah. It's giving me ideas, which is what I was at a loss for. Yeah. I think that's.
It's a lot. It is a lot. I will say that. But once you get it, oh, it's the best feeling ever. It really is.
Yeah, I've had a few things like that with Bubble where I've been banging my head for a while and then suddenly I get it and everything suddenly falls into place.
Oh, and, yeah, it's the best.
This is why I'm testing myself with doing things that I probably don't actually need to do immediately, because I like the challenge of trying to work out what it is.
Sure, yeah. It is fun, especially if you're a problem solver, somebody that likes finding solutions. I find Bubble almost therapeutic. I feel like that's honestly a little sadistic to say, but I do find it fun though, being able to here's a problem and then here's the solution. It's nice. So
yeah, I'm exactly the same. It's cathartic. It's kind of do it for fun.
Bubble building is meant for puzzle lovers. We love puzzles.
It's very true. Yeah, honestly, I could get down with a good puzzle.
Cool. Well, I'm going to go and take that knowledge now and try and work this bit out.
Sweet, rock on. Glad I got to show you that. Yeah,
that's awesome. Appreciate your help.
Absolutely. You know where to find us. So if you need any further assistance, just give us a ring, join office hours, whatever it may be. We're here to help.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sounds good.
Sweet.
Nice to meet you, Stuart.
Yeah, lovely speaking to you. And enjoy the rest of your evening.
You as well. Well, I guess morning for you, right?
It's just clocked over into afternoon.
You still have a full day ahead of you.
Yeah, that's it. I can do this. I can get this thing done.
Amazing. Cool. You have a great one.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yep, no problem. Hey, Cameron.
Rob is joined.
Really? Rob?
Is that the Rob?
This is the Rob. Rob is awesome, clearly. Hey,
Sweet.
Rob.
Well, welcome in, Rob.
Hello. I just thought I'd peek in to see if there was anything I understood or not.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we were
Well, we
just going over nesting and sort of like referencing data types to one another.
Yep. Do you have any questions, Rob?
No,
Nope.
I'm about bubbled
Okay.
out, but like I just kind of wanted to peek to say, can I watch one of these and at least part of it and understand some of it?
Gotcha. What should we do, Cameron?
Well, if
What
you'd
should we show
like,
him?
what I can do, let's go. What did I name it? Oh, that's my problem is remembering what I name things. Create a status. Here we are. So the question that that Stuart just asked before he left was how he would be able to add a date to something, and it's pretty simple, but there's definitely many ways to do it. So the way that we approached this was if a user was to submit something, the user themselves wouldn't actually be submitting the date. This would happen in the back end, but just one of the many ways that we could approach it. So the user is going to be responsible for adding a title, and then they're going to be also responsible for clicking the submit button. I got to move the bubble thing, or the zoom thing out of the way. But when they do that, what we're ultimately doing is we're creating a status. So let me real quick just reference our database. What we've done is we've created a project which has a list of statuses, and then a status, which would have a completed, a date, and a title. It probably should be set as default no, because if it was automatically completed, that'd be sort of weird. But so yes, the user clicks the button. What we've done is we've created a new status, and this is where the question that Stuart was wondering is how would I be able to add a date to something? Which there's also multiple ways to do that too. We could go ahead and type in the current date time, which is of course useful for the current date time, or we could use arbitrary date time, which we're just able to set whatever date that we truly want. I've seen Tanya say Monday at, let's say, 4 p.m. And it does just that, where it says Monday, March 21st at 4 p.m. So different ways to set the date. This just one of many, but current date time is the way that we're going to approach this now, just setting the date time. But then next what we're doing, and this is what we were also talking about where we're referencing data to one another, sort of nesting the status inside the project. Where what we've done is we're searching for a project. And because we only have one project currently, just one project currently, we haven't added any constraints. We've just said, search for that project, first item. If you have more, let's say the user is assigned to a certain project, and the user has a project on their user record, you would be able to say only when current user equals, or rather when project equals current user's project ID. I don't want to get too confusing, obviously.
Oh, is it just me? Or is that a
No,
weird
you're static.
Cameron, we can't hear you. Cameron, hello.
I'm pretty sure he can hear us because I think you heard him say, and then I lost him again.
I don't know what just happened. That was weird. I just dropped out. Cameron, I feel the
Like
same.
what
someone
about
walked
now?
off and walked out of range.
Yes,
There
now
we
that's
go.
better.
Oh, so weird. No, I didn't move. My mic didn't move. I blame aliens.
It's aliens.
It's
Yeah.
always the
Alien
aliens.
invasion.
Or the little
Always.
elves. Yeah, either one. But okay, so I don't know what you heard. I basically just said I didn't want to make it too confusing, so we'll just show you this in practice where the data references one another. Refresh the page. We'll say this is title number 2. I didn't reset my field or anything. Traditionally, you would say like reset relevant inputs. Which is best.
Familiar, Rob?
It is best practice.
I know that one.
Yeah, it is best practice definitely to do that for sure. Just sort of in a rush and a hurry just to get the data loaded. But yeah, you're going to want to add the reset relevant inputs. But now what you can see is that we have 3 statuses instead of the 2 that were here prior. And we can actually look at the most recent status. We have said by default it is not completed, and we've also said that the title is number 2, but then also that the current date time is the current date time. So we're all in Tucson. If you look at your clock right now, that's the time. So what we can also do, last bit of thing here, is that we have a unique ID on every single record that's ever created. And this is how we're able to reference that record, at least without having to reference any other data inside it. We can always reference its unique ID. We'll go back to our project, and we have 2 ways of searching for this record inside. Let's say we have a bunch of projects and we're trying to figure out where our status is added. We can do quick Control F and then paste that, and then we can see that it's been added. Or we can go ahead and search it inside this search bar, where it'll pull up the project where the status has been added. You can see inside here, we have 3 of them. And now we have statuses communicating with our projects, or vice versa.
Can I ask a dumb question?
Go for it.
So being as you're looking at them all as like unique IDs, and that's confusing as hell, could you slug each one? And then when you're looking at that other page with the 3 projects in there, would it show the slug name? Yeah, right there. So if you slug the individual ones, in theory, because that's slugging all 3, but I didn't know. Like,
you know, that's actually a really good question. I know that you can assign slugs for sure. The thing is, though, so let me show you when we're in our data type, what we've done. Let's go to our project. So as you can see here, our status is a list of statuses. And so to show you, we're only given this. So this is what I did. I just said status is, the name is status, the field type is status, and it will be a list. And it did not give me an option to manipulate anything else, because what it's looking at its base value. It's basically Bubble saying, hey, how is Bubble going to look at this status? How is Bubble going to be able to find it? And since Bubble has the unique IDs assigned to everything, I genuinely think this is probably the only way to do it, although Tanya would have a more definitive answer. Tanya, am I crazy, or is that the only way to do it?
The only way to do what? To view your statuses?
Yeah, so he's wondering if we'd be able to.
If you go to your status, where are the statuses? Is it an option set, or is
the
it
screen he's looking at right now? See how it's got the crazy 3 unique IDs in there on that previous
Got it.
screen?
Go to status. Go to status. Okay, and then it has a title. Okay, so go back to app data. Click on primary fields.
Primary fields. Gotcha. Yes. Here we go.
And change it to the title. So status and change it to title.
Yes.
There you go.
The wizard herself.
There, yeah, that's what I was wondering. That's much cleaner.
Yeah, it makes it a little easier to read for sure. I've gotten very used to just having the default value there as I build rapidly. But this does help, absolutely. Make it a little bit more clean and concise.
Oh yeah, for testing, it's imperative, I think.
I always do the Control C and then Control F, Control V.
Yeah.
Am I weird? Yeah, for sure, but you know.
No, I've done that too. Like I do that too.
What's the Control F do?
It brings up the search bar on your browser.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Control F for find, basically.
Gotcha. That makes sense. That's one of the very few keyboard shortcuts I don't use.
Oh my goodness, I use it all the time.
That's hilarious. Same.
Yeah, all the time. It's best when you're on a really big Wikipedia article or wherever there's a lot of text and you have to find like a keyword.
Well, if I'm looking up something on the internet, I'm on my phone. I don't really do it on the computer, and so that doesn't really work.
Makes
Only
sense.
for that reason.
Makes sense. Yeah, definitely. But cool, yeah, that's what I was going over with Stuart here. Just making sure that we knew how data referenced one another and that we'd be able to add specifically, a date to a record. And one of the things that you will notice as you continue bubbling is that your data So I'm in data types. I'm just looking at my status. Or you could look at rate. You could look at whatever you create. You're always going to have a modified and a created date. I would recommend always having, or at least if you're going to be using, manipulating, or just overall dealing with any date, to create your own date record inside this, just so you can actually have a little bit more fluidity, I guess, leeway with it.
And for making test data especially, it's just like, yeah. Because sometimes you have to update, like whether you're testing or you're working in your live database, sometimes you have to do things on behalf of a user. And if you're just referring to the system generated modified date or created date, then you won't have a way to force those to be a particular date. Whereas you can force a date field to be whatever date and time you want it to be.
Yep, exactly.
Yep. I'm with you, Cameron.
Yeah,
and I always have an owner. I always have an owner field too. Like if it's something where it's being created by a user, I don't just use the creator field.
The
system default creator field.
Yeah, in fact, as I was telling Stuart that I know Tanya for a fact would say to create a date field. I said that with confidence.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, so date and user especially. The creator, as you can see, it does include the user that created it. There's going to be times though where a user is going to, like when you click a button or have a backend workflow run, sometimes, not all the time, those users can differ as well. And then you'd also just want to make sure that with the user that you create, it just, again, it gives you a little bit more flexibility with how you want that data, at least in my eyes.
Like considering your app that you're working on, Rob, outside of Bubble School.
My awesome app that's going to make me $1 billion minus $1 billion.
We like that.
Your amazing app.
It's a horrible concept app. I'm literally just doing it just to practice what Tanya's teaching in class. It's a virtual Rolodex. Like I'd never, ever, ever use it myself. It's so bad, but it lets me build something.
There you go. But you have an admin portal and you have admin access to run as other users, right? So you might not want to mess with their data in such a way that it would change the way they view their data if you were filtering or sorting by date, right? So if you have a date field that you've created, when the admin makes changes, you can leave that date field alone so that the user would never know the difference when they go into their own app. But if you're relying on the modified date, when you make a change to that record, the modified date changes with the record. You don't have any control over that. Does that make sense? Kind of, sort of.
Kind of, sort of, but I don't understand why I would want to change a date. Like and my head isn't wrapping around the practical application of even doing that. And if I can't get around that, then my brain doesn't let me see what you're trying to say.
Gotcha. We'll cover it over and over and over again. Repetition is the name of the game.
Yeah, it's sort of abstract, so I can absolutely understand that. But in practice, you'll understand for sure. It'll make more sense.
I'm a super analytical guy. I'm very black and white. So it's like, well, why would I go in there and change? Like literally while you're talking, my brain gets stuck on that one concept of why would I go in there to change the date if I didn't want them to see the date change anyway? And then until I can get past that, it's like you guys sound like you did earlier. It's just static to me.
Blah, 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 blah.
The Charlie Brown voice.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I gotcha. I feel you.
But if you're a black and white super analytical dude, Bubble is for you. It definitely is.
Yep.
We'll see.
I think you're taking to it, Rob.
I know Excel super duper well. I know this is very different, but that's a very analytical program.
Yeah.
It's got a similarity.
Yeah, you're dealing with data and referencing data and manipulating it. It is different, absolutely, but it's also similar.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like when I'm trying to figure out how to do something. I understand the formulas and how they work. It's just I don't understand the language that Bubble's putting it in or the clicking it instead of typing it.
Nope.
So I have to just like Tanya says, repetition of understanding what the values actually are meaning and putting it in a way that my brain recognizes it based off my previous experience with Excel and everything else. And then, just getting that in my head that, oh, okay, that's what, option sets mean and what it actually does, or, that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, in the next month and a half, you're gonna get it. Oh, a law is gonna make sense, and you're gonna be like, wow, I can't believe I never got it. I promise you, especially with Tanya as the teacher. Absolutely.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure, Tanya.
Lots of pressure. I got lots of pressure. I've got 15 people relying on me, so lots of pressure. It's fine.
No,
We're having fun.
After this, you can go to Mexico and take a vacation for 3 months. Yeah, it's whatever.
Okay.
That's the plan. I haven't been able to take a vacation in a decade.
Right?
Oh, you got to do it.
We definitely need a vacation for sure.
Well, no, mine's different reasons. I don't know how much Tanya's told you about me, but I have like a back condition that screws with me. So my regular corporate day-to-day job, I miss so much work that I can never take time off for vacation because one, I never have vacation time because I use it all up because of my back. I mean, hell, these past like 3 weeks, I've worked maybe 2 days.
Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry to hear that. That's rough. The back.
It's that time of year. It's just
let's get into after hours.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. For all those that are watching at home, thanks for tuning in and seeing how we manipulate and deal with data. We're going to go ahead and move into after office hours. So if you have a project that's maybe a little bit more sensitive, you're working on a client, don't want to show it in front of a camera, if you are a part of the developer membership of Pro NoCoders, you can join us in after office hours. With that said, thanks for tuning in, and until next time, you have a good one.